Okay, here's your punctuation cram session. The period, you're going to use a period at the end of most sentences. Time to use periods include after statements, Canada is a country, after mild commands, pass me the chips, and after indirect questions. I asked if there would be homework. You're going to use a question mark after direct questions, such as, will there be homework? The exclamation mark is used when you have a strong command or a dramatic statement. Here are two examples. Look out and I hate the snow. Comma, I think commas are the most complicated punctuation mark for academic writing. And I think they're complicated because there is a history to commas. Commas originally were used to indicate when a speaker should take a breath, but this rule is no longer true for academic writing. There are about 12 rules for comma usage. We are just going to focus on 4 of them. Okay, so you are going to use a comma when you are joining two independent clauses with a conjunction such as and or but. So when you are using a coordinating conjunction and you have two independent clauses, here's an example. Violet set the bread on the counter, comma, and she sliced it with her knife. Just as an important note, if you have a similar sentence structure, but you have a dependent clause instead of an independent clause for the second clause, you're not going to use a comma. Here's the example. Violet set the bread on the counter and sliced it with her knife. So you can see the difference between those two sentences. The only real difference besides the comma is that in the first sentence, the second clause is she sliced it with her knife, whereas in the second sentence, the second clause is sliced it with her knife, which creates a dependent clause. You are going to need to use a comma when you begin a sentence with an introductory phrase or a dependent clause. Here's an example. In the novel Rockbound, comma, the main character is a young fisherman. Here's another example. When Douglas cooked the strawberry jam, comma, he added hot peppers. You are going to need to use commas when you are listing items. Here's an example. The ingredients for Doug's jam included strawberries, comma, sugar, comma, hot peppers, comma, salt, comma, ketchup, comma, and an old shoe. You are going to need to use a comma when introducing a quotation with a dependent clause. Here's an example. Violet tasted the jam and said, comma, that's gross. The semicolon, generally, it is my suggestion that you should avoid the semicolon in academic writing unless it is absolutely necessary. However, here are two examples where you can use a semicolon. You can use a semicolon to join two complete sentences without using a conjunction or a period. Here's an example. I like apples, semicolon, she likes oranges. Here's a better reason to use a semicolon. If you have a list that already contains commas, you really do need semicolons so that the list will still make sense. Here's an example. Characters in The Simpsons include Homer Simpson, comma, the dad, semicolon, Bart, comma, the son, semicolon, and Marge, comma, the mom. For the colon, you use a colon after an independent clause that leads to a list. Here's an example. Here is my grocery list. Colon, carrots, potatoes, milk, cream, chicken, and cookies. You're also going to need to use a colon after an independent clause that leads directly to a quotation. Here's an example. In ESL, the book, comma, the author discusses how punctuation seems extremely confusing, colon, quotation, it all looks like a bunch of dots and swoops on the paper, quotation mark. For apostrophes, apostrophes can actually prove to be kind of difficult as well. Here are some of the rules for apostrophes. The most important rule to remember is that apostrophes show possession. Okay, so look at the example sentence below. That is Luke's ham sandwich. So it's just one Luke, right? But you use the apostrophe S to indicate that Luke owns that sandwich. You do not use apostrophes for plural nouns, singular verbs, or personal pronouns. Here are 3 examples. Plural nouns first, you have dogs. The dogs belong to the owner. Okay, so there's no apostrophe for dogs. Singular verb like breaks. My car breaks down every December. Or personal pronouns such as its fur is neon green. We talked about its a little bit more in class, and if you have any questions about that, please email me or come and see me at some point too. Here is the other rule for apostrophes that does not involve possession. You use apostrophes to form contractions. The example that I have here is do plus not equals don't, and you have an apostrophe between the N and the T. But I think the really important thing to remember is that we don't use contractions in formal writing. So if we're talking about an academic essay, you really should not be using contractions. If we're talking about something other than an academic essay, then you probably can use contractions. And I'm thinking about maybe like a magazine article. Okay, the quotation mark. You use quotation marks to indicate dialogue. Okay, if we're talking about a short story or fiction, a novel or something like that, you can use quotation marks for dialogue. For a play, there are different rules, but we don't need to talk about that right now because we are focusing more so on academic essays. The most important thing for academic essays is that you need quotation marks to indicate when you're directly quoting from a source. Here's an example. In Rockbound, comma, Frank Parker Day writes, comma, and then you have your quotation marks here to indicate that this is directly from Rockbound. Here's the quotation. A landsman who looks at the even surface of the sea and whose acquaintance with the bottom is limited to slightly pitched bathing beaches thinks of the seafloor as flat and level. And then you have your quotation mark and then page 27. Okay, so that about does it for punctuation. And I believe we are moving on to articles next.